Okay, guys. Last week we talked about the Articles of Confederation, and we're going to kind of continue on with that today with the Constitution. Switch slides, please. Thank you, sir. So, what is the Constitution? Anybody?
The Constitution
Mason.
is basically the main law of the United States.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. So, the Constitution is the supreme law of the U.S. It is the foundation and source of the legal authority and underlying existence of the U.S. of A. and the federal government of the United States. It provides the framework for the organization of the United States government. So, the basic principles of the Constitution. Popular sovereignty. Does anybody know what that means? We haven't really talked about it yet because the Articles of Confederation didn't really deal with it. So, popular sovereignty is where the government power resides in the people. There's limited government. The government is not all powerful. So that means they can only do what the people let it do. So that's what we have today is popular sovereignty. We vote every November, right? Separation of powers. Does anybody know what separation of powers means? Anybody? Nobody? Okay. Well, Gary.
Checks and balances would be known as the separation of powers. The executive, legislative, and judicial all check each other out.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. So like they're all separated, but they each can check each other.
All right.
Federalism is a division of power among national and state governments. So checks and balances. This is pretty much what Garen just said, but so the executive branch, that's the president, right? The judicial is the Supreme Court. The legislative is our U.S. representatives and senators. So who wrote the Constitution? That would be this guy, James Madison. James Madison is considered the father of the Constitution. His important contributions to the Constitution are the Virginia Plan, separation of powers, which we just talked about, and the Bill of Rights. Does anybody know what the Bill of Rights are? So, we haven't really covered this yet, so it's something we're going to jump into today. But the Bill of Rights are the first 10 amendments to the Constitution. Like freedom of speech, our Second Amendment right to bear arms, stuff like that. So, why was the Constitution written? After the Revolutionary War, the Articles of Confederation set up the structure of the U.S. government. The federal government was very, very weak, and this created many problems. There was no separation of powers, only unicameral legislature. So, if we have a bicameral legislature now, what does that mean?
That means to have two house legislators.
Yeah, so it's two houses, bicameral, right? So if bicameral's two, what would unicameral be?
That's just one.
Just one, correct. So it was also a weak central government. The states had the most power. Congress did not have the power to tax. This means they could not get their finances in order. So today we pay tax like salary tax, income, our income tax, same thing, salary, property tax to pay for roads and services, right? Back then they didn't have that. So imagine, like, if it were today's standards, we wouldn't have like a trash service to pick up our trash during the week because there was no money to do it. There are quite a few more problems with the Articles of Confederation. In order to change the Articles, all 13 states had to approve the changes. This made it basically impossible to make any changes because how could you get all 13 to agree on the same thing? Something for New York might not be as beneficial as something for Georgia. For any major laws to pass, they had to be approved by 9 of the 13 states, which was difficult. Congress did not have the power to regulate commerce, which caused competition between states. It also caused diplomatic issues when states refused to pay for goods they received from other nations. So Shays' Rebellion. Have we heard of Shays' Rebellion before in another history class? You don't remember learning it? So Shays' Rebellion was an uprising of farmers in Massachusetts led by Daniel Shays. Basically, they got mad for some of the things that they were paying for, and so they took matters into their own hands. This rebellion helped convince leaders that a strong central government was needed because the state could not stop them from rebelling. So when was the Constitution written? May 25th to September 17th, 1787 in Philadelphia. So they wanted to revise the Articles of Confederation, which we talked about. Ended up totally replacing the Articles and creating a new government. This meeting of the minds was the Constitutional Convention. So the important outcomes of the Constitutional Convention: the Virginia Plan, separation of powers, bicameral legislature, federal government had increased powers. So Virginia Plan, who came up with that? We just talked about it. It was the guy who wrote the Constitution. Mason?
James Madison?
Correct. So the New Jersey Plan was the unicameral legislature where every state received equal representation. The Great Compromise was basically a combination of these two plans. It had a bicameral legislature where the House of Reps were based on population, and the Senate was based on equal representation. So it also included the 3/5 clause because slavery was still a thing, sadly, back in this time. Slaves count as 3/5 of a person for representation purpose and taxes. The ratification debate. So, to ratify, we needed 9 of 13 states to approve the Constitution before it went into effect. There's huge debate between two sides, the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists. The Federalists supported the Constitution and a strong central government. Alexander Hamilton, James Madison, and John Jay were all Federalists. They wrote these articles called the Federalist Papers that were in defense of the Constitution. The Anti-Federalists wanted a weaker central government. They thought too much power was taken away from the states. They opposed the Constitution, wanted a Bill of Rights. These guys were basically Samuel Adams and Patrick Henry. So ratification of the Constitution. It was officially adopted after it was ratified by New Hampshire. Once the government convened, they added a Bill of Rights to the Constitution. Now, we just talked about the Bill of Rights. What was it? The first what? The first 10 amendments. Correct, Mason. So the structure of the Constitution. The preamble is a statement of purpose. The articles, the first article was the legislative branch, the second the executive, third the judicial, fourth relations among the states, fifth amendment processes, sixth federal power, and seventh ratification. There are 27 total amendments, and the first 10 are what, Mason?
The Bill of Rights.
The Bill of Rights. Article 1, the legislative branch. So it's bicameral, which we already talked about. Senate, House of Representatives. So if there are 2 senators for each state, how many senators are there total in the U.S.? Cameron?
100.
100, correct. The reps serve for 2-year terms, and senators serve for 6-year terms. They make laws, set taxes, declare war, override vetoes, borrow money, regulate international and national trade, and print money. Article 2, the executive branch. So these are the president and vice president. 4-year terms. They must be 35 years old, a 14-year resident of the U.S., a natural-born citizen. They're elected by the Electoral College. Important powers of the executive branch are commander-in-chief. They grant pardons, make treaties, appoint federal officers, and ensure laws are executed. Article 3, the judicial branch. Supreme Court judges serve for life unless impeached. Judicial power rests with U.S. Supreme Courts and other courts created by Congress. The important powers of the judicial branch are they decide the cases of constitutional law and federal law, cases involving ambassadors go straight to the Supreme Court, and judicial review comes later, which we deal with now, but in 1803 with Marbury versus Madison. Other important articles, Article 5, amendments. Amendments are proposed when 2/3 of the House and Senate deem it necessary. Amendments are proposed when 2/3, must be ratified by 3/4 of the state legislators or by conventions in 3/4 of the states. Basically, that's all we're going to deal with amendments. We have now a graphic organizer that we're going to do together. At the end of this, we will go over the essay that we're going to work on tomorrow that will cover the Constitution, and that should be it for today. We'll spend the rest of class. We've got about 15 minutes left filling the graphic organizer out, and that'll be it. Thanks. You're good, Chris.